Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first town hall of the new year. I hope you were able to find ways to rest and relax over the holidays. After all the heavy lifting that 2020 required, I know how badly that was needed. I'd like to start this first town hall of 2021 with my sincere gratitude for all that you have done to keep this university not only afloat, but thriving during these challenging times. I am so appreciative. You know, when I look back at what we've been through together in 2020 and how we've handled the emerging crises that we never could have imagined just a year ago, I'm reminded of this quote by Martin Luther King Jr. "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." And sometimes I feel like I'm bursting with pride at how our Links community has come together in these times of challenge and controversy with compassion, commitment, with sacrifice, and with unwavering devotion to our students and to each other. Amid the pandemic and its economic impact, the racial injustice that it's revealed, the armed siege on the US Capitol that we witnessed last week, for me, it feels like we're holding a gigantic X-ray machine up to our society, and it's exposing our weaknesses, our fragilities, our division. But this exposure of our vulnerability, our inequities, and the threat to our democracy from the spread of false information, most immediately about our election, has also created a growing awareness that as a society, we all must take responsibility for safeguarding and improving our fragile democracy. And to counter what led to the horrific assault on our seat of government, we need to address its causes, including ignorance and the growing disregard by both leaders and followers for anyone who doesn't agree with them. And that is why we, my fellow Links, are so important to the solution. We are one of those relatively few places in America that brings an incredibly diverse group of students together to learn and to listen to alternate perspectives, to teach critical analysis so we can discern fact from propaganda, to discuss requirements for an inclusive democratic society, and to deliberate together to improve that democracy. And different from so many places today in America, and even many institutions of higher ed, where people are surrounded by others who share the same background and perspective, our students reflect the changing demographics in Colorado and in our nation. We have a rare opportunity to lead respectful, robust, and inclusive discussions that can begin the difficult but necessary building of trust across difference. Our graduates will bring their own perspectives into shaping the future. Some will graduate fighting for a national healthcare system, and others for one that's run by states. Some are going to want lower taxes, and others will support higher ones. But they will all learn methods to distinguish truth from fiction. And they're going to leave CU Denver with tools and frameworks for evidence-based reasoning and the thirst for solutions that may use different approaches, but are based in common truths. And we want, and going forward, we need to ensure our learning environments provoke curiosity, build empathy for others, and intentionally challenge preconceptions and prejudices. And if we do our jobs well, we're going to graduate students who know the difference between truth and lies. We will teach that the best weapons for change are words and evidence. So whatever role you're playing at CU Denver, whether you're teaching classes, serving meals in our dining hall, advising our students, keeping our buildings functioning and clean and safe, doing research to uncover new knowledge, supporting our academic units, or fundraising for our future, you are an important part of an institution that's not only supporting the rebuilding of our economy, but the rebuilding of our democracy. So, colleagues, we are on this journey together at this extraordinary moment at both our university and in our country. And there is truly no place I would rather be than here with you. There is no mission I would rather be fulfilling. There are no colleagues with whom I'd rather be collaborating. I want you to know that right now, my highest level of focus remains on two things. First, keeping our community safe as we continue to educate our students. And second, on visioning our future, one where we capitalize on our particular combination of advantages, to carve out our unique position in the world. And today we're going to talk about both, how and what we're doing right now to carry out our mission for the near term, and how strategic planning efforts will unfold this semester that will chart the course to a vibrant future that is going to excite the next generation of Link students and faculty and staff and others that want to be a part of what we're doing. So let's start with what's happening on and near our campus right now. We are aware that some external groups are planning protests in the days ahead, just a mile away from campus at the state capitol. And we hope that participants will make their voices heard in a meaningful, peaceful manner. But as a campus, we must be prudent and prepare should those protests escalate and move to other areas of downtown. And in recent days, I've met with my executive team and police to discuss preparedness and how we'll communicate with our students and faculty and staff should emergencies occur. And let me emphasize, at this time, we have absolutely no reason to believe that there are safety concerns for the campus. But please know that your safety is my top priority, and we're going to continue to monitor these situations and communicate what you need to know via email and CU Denver alerts. And amid this current political turbulence, we are, of course, still contending with this pandemic. One truly hopeful sign for 2021 is that vaccines have been developed and that they're effective and that they are on their way. And we are hopeful that by the summer, they will be available to all. The Auraria campus is preparing to be a vaccine distribution center, both for our campus and for the city. And while we do not know the timing of when this may happen, there is a campus group of students and staff and faculty who are working on principles for prioritization that can be recommended to the 4 CEOs of Auraria. And Auraria-wide communications group is working on ways to share information about the clinic and also to educate our community and to address concerns and issues with the vaccine. And we're working with Denver Public Health Department and the state to determine when and how vaccines should be administered to our campus populations. Our partners at COVID Check Colorado have amazingly stepped forward to support this effort, and the state health department has laid out a priority order for vaccine distributions based on people's risk profiles. Phase 1 started with healthcare workers who have direct interaction with COVID patients. And we're now in stage 1B, which includes people 70 and over, although the governor has indicated that he may drop that age to 65 in accordance with recent federal guidance. And we are actively lobbying local and state authorities to speed vaccine distribution and to flesh out our important role. And while we do this, it's critical that we acknowledge that speed is important, but it also must be paired with equity. And our goal is to be a place where our vaccination priorities and process honors individuals and acknowledges COVID's disproportionate impact on our communities of color. Exactly how this will happen is in process, but know that it's top of mind. And when we receive vaccines and discretion authority for their distribution, we will reach out to those eligible at the appropriate time. The health center at Auraria is still working through the operational details, so we ask you to be patient. When we're able to provide more detail, we will. And meanwhile, if you're in the priority age group of people over 65, we encourage you to contact one of the health systems in town to get vaccinated. More information is available on the Colorado Department of Public Health's website. Although we want to get back to normal, the reality is that vaccination on a mass scale is going to take many months. And although there will be those in our community who aren't comfortable or can't get vaccinated, what this means is that we need to stay the course with what works in combating this virus. Anthony Fauci and other public health officials are clear that mask wearing, social distancing, and lower room capacities will be with us for a while longer, and we cannot get complacent. Health officials also continue to encourage that we get tested, and I've done it multiple times. Thankfully, through our ongoing partnership with COVID Check Colorado, free COVID-19 testing for our employees and our students and their household continues. And free drive-through testing is available at North High School and at the health center at Auraria, which has set up a drive-through testing center on campus. And students in Links Crossing have already started to be tested and will be tested every 2 weeks, just as they were in the fall. And thanks to the efforts of many in planning our safe return to campus last August, and to our entire community for following safety protocols, our fall semester was a safe one. We recorded no COVID transmissions in classrooms, labs, and studios. And relative to our size, we saw a few cases, relatively few cases in our housing and other areas of campus. And based on this record of success, our spring semester will follow a very similar model, a mix of in-person and remote classes designed to keep our community safe and to ensure our students' ongoing success and to continue innovating for the future. We are expecting almost 20% of our courses to have some on-campus contact. Our spring semester start date of January 19th remains unchanged. We did rearrange spring break to avoid students having to come back to campus after traveling, and following discussions with students who told us they wanted to keep spring break, but they understood the need to move it. We changed the break from March 22nd to April 19th through 25th. Courses and finals for the 2 weeks following spring break will be delivered almost entirely remotely to help ensure safety after the break. And right now we have no plans to adjust class formats or staff work locations mid-semester, although we continue to meet regularly with Denver Public Health Department to determine if any modifications are going to be needed. And as with last fall, we should all be prepared to go remote if public health circumstances dictate. Here's a quick overview of spring enrollment. Total enrollment number is down 0.6% from last year at this time, which is above what we had budgeted. And this is good news for us. More specifically, undergraduate enrollment is down 6.2% from last year at this time. And we anticipated this and we planned for it. And however, graduate enrollment is up 14%, following an increase that we saw in fall 2020 as well. And this is tracking well above budget. Thank you to our staff who've been reaching out to students who have not yet re-enrolled for this semester, helping them to address academic and financial holds and successfully re-enrolling many. And I also want to thank faculty and staff for finding different ways to offer classes and services in different modalities. One size doesn't fit all, especially during the pandemic. And I really appreciate your hard work to meet our students' individual needs. As we continue to evolve our enrollment conversations beyond spring, Carrie John and Gabriel Castaño will be leading our strategic enrollment management initiatives. Thank you in advance to everyone who will be called upon to participate in these efforts with them. The pandemic is taking a toll on all of us, and some more than others. And I am very pleased to say that we've been able to invest in a number of mental health initiatives to provide real-time help, more counseling sessions, more case management, more community trainings, more wellness offerings to our students and to our employees. And we're going to continue these extra mental health services through the spring semester because we need to take care of our students and we need to take care of our community. As for our financial situation, there have been many articles about the effect of the pandemic on universities in our state and in our country, and how some are being forced to close or downsize due to decreased enrollment. I want to assure you that CU Denver will make it through, thanks in large part to our careful planning to absorb the financial impact, and because of the sacrifices that this community has collectively shared. Along with the recent announcement of additional COVID relief funds from Congress, CU Denver's financial positioning is improving. And there are a number of variables that continue to affect our financial situation, and these include spring enrollment, decisions by the governor and legislature on state funding for higher education, and allowable uses of the federal COVID relief funds. But our efforts to support our students and mitigate negative enrollment numbers are putting us in a position where I'm very happy to say we expect to be able to remove the employee furloughs for next year, July 1st, going forward. This is fantastic news, especially given the extraordinary circumstances we have faced this year. A huge thank you to Jennifer Sobene and her team for managing the financial aspects of the pandemic so adroitly. So looking ahead to the summer and fall 2021 semesters, I'm hoping to have a robust on-campus presence as quickly as possible. Of course, this is going to depend on the public health situation in Colorado. Our best guess at this point is that the summer semester will be run similarly to the current one, with significantly reduced level of on-campus in-person classes and operations. If the vaccine is available and ready to be taken up by our community over the spring and summer, we're hoping that by fall, most students who want an on-campus experience will be able to have one. However, We are absolutely committed to the safety of our employees foremost and will not put you at risk or force you to come back to work in an unsafe environment. Even though the pandemic continues, our momentum continues as well. And this spring semester will be pivotal for defining our future direction. We are not stopping. Here are some quick updates on a number of important initiatives that we have currently underway. So proud of this. The Equity Task Force is in full swing. I'm excited, so excited about the real work this task force is doing to put our institution on a better course with respect to equity and inclusion, with wide-scale participation from our community in the process. And I understand that between the task force and the supporting action teams, over 150 people are participating in this effort. And I'm looking forward to receiving its recommendations by the end of March. And I am thrilled that the CU Foundation and the system have provided CU Denver with $1 million in one-time funds to support DEI initiatives at CU Denver, and I intend to use these funds to support recommendations from the Equity Task Force. Also, our national search for our first CU Denver focused Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion has yielded some outstanding candidates, and we're planning to have open forums next week for our community to meet finalists. And we're eagerly awaiting word on our federal designation as a Hispanic serving institution, where Latinos make up at least 25% of enrollment. This designation is going to bring significant benefits to our community, including eligibility for grant money to support our students. And we are going to let you know as soon as we hear. We're also making great strides in other leadership searches. Marie Williams, who served most recently as Chief Marketing Officer at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, will be joining us as our new Vice Chancellor for University Communications in 11 days. Marie brings expertise and perspective that will help elevate our impact and our reach. A big thank you to the search committee led by CLAS Dean Pam Jansma and Assistant Vice Chancellor for Enrollment Management, Gabrielle Castaño, as well as Karen Klimczak, who has provided strong interim leadership since June. And we launched national searches last month for a CU Denver Provost and a Senior Vice Chancellor for Strategic Enrollment and Student Success after conducting several listening sessions with faculty, staff, and students. So thank you all for your input on both these positions. And for those of you who haven't been back to campus lately, when you do come back, you're going to see a giant new building right near the Student Commons. I am delighted to tell you that construction on our City Heights Resident Hall for first-year students is still tracking on time, and we expect it to open in the fall. And adjacent to the dorm is our Learning Commons, where the first 2 floors are going to provide a one-stop shop for student services. And on the 3rd floor, we have a cool opportunity to create a space exclusively devoted to faculty support. And we're planning a community hub for faculty, adjuncts, and lecturers and instructors, and spaces for groups focused on innovative pedagogy. So if you have thoughts on faculty groups we should be talking to, please reach out to Carrie Weatherford, Director of Institutional Planning. You know, one silver lining of this forced experiment of COVID is that it's required us to look differently at how we operate, including how we use all of our space on campus. And we've learned a lot from the innovations we made during the pandemic. And as a campus, we need to collectively figure out what changes make sense for us to keep. And as we look to the future, many of you have asked about the continuity of telework beyond the pandemic. And I agree, we do need to figure out what makes sense for our employees and for our institution. And we've learned a lot. So I've asked Human Resources to get this conversation started with our community. And as I hope you're aware, we launched our strategic planning process this week. And this process grew out of what you told me during my listening tour, that you're ready to build on our momentum and shape the future of CU Denver, this place that we all love. And this is going to require us to think strategically about our shared values and vision, as well as what differentiates us from the rest of the pack. And this process is going to work and be of real use only if it includes a wide range of voices across our faculty, staff, student body, alumni, and other supporters. And that's why we need your participation throughout the process, especially right now. This week and next, we're focusing on our vision for 2030. Please share your ideas on what you'd like to see reflected in that vision by attending virtual community sessions and or completing online surveys. And you can access both at the ucdenver.edu/strategic plan URL. But you need to do it soon because these sessions end and the surveys close Friday, January 22nd. And after that, there's going to be a number of more ways to get involved with the working groups. More information on that to follow. The website provides more ways for you to express interest in participating now. I am bound and determined that this plan not sit on a shelf, but it become meaningful and useful and effective in guiding our trajectory. We're going to rely on it to tell the world who we are and where we're headed in the long run, and to adjust our planning and our resources accordingly. So that's why your contributions are important. Finally, I'd like to remind you that this Monday, January 18th, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which this year is an additional paid holiday. We made the decision to grant this day off to acknowledge how much we appreciate your perseverance, your adaptability, and your innovation in these challenging times. Thank you for your dedication and for continuing to support our collective success. And so now I want to introduce our panel and open the floor to your questions. Please start submitting them. We have Rod Nairn, our provost, Jennifer Sobonet, our chief financial officer, Chris Puckett, our legal counsel, who with others has been leading our COVID-19 response, Elena Jones, our interim vice provost and senior vice chancellor of student success, Marty Dunn, dean of the College of Engineering, Design and Computing, who's chairing our strategic plan steering committee, and of course, Paul Teske, once again, Dean of School of Public Affairs, who will again be serving as our moderator. Paul?
Great. Thank you so much, Chancellor Marks. Thank you for your information, your insights, your inspiration, and especially your outstanding leadership since you joined us about 6 months ago. So we have about 10 questions that we're asked in advance that we'll get started with, but hopefully the 500 or so participants that are on this call will start asking questions and putting them in, and they'll be answered either behind the scenes or, if we have time, online in real time between now and 5 o'clock. So the first question I have is for our provost, Rod Nairn, and it's about accreditation by the Higher Learning Commission. Where are we with the accreditation of the campus?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, and this year is our year for re-accreditation by the Higher Learning Commission. For those of you who were here 10 years ago, this is a repeat, but it'll be very different from the last time through. This will be an entirely virtual re-accreditation. The site team has been identified, and they will be working with us shortly to create teams of folks who will be interviewed by Zoom meetings. There'll be one of the site visitors who comes in person to visit the campus, but since it'll be virtual, that'll be on the end of April, 26th and 27th. Some of you may be contacted by us soon to participate in those visits. As far as the materials go, this is a little different from before. It's not a self-study. It's much more of a compliance-oriented visit. There are 7 chapters. Terry Porter has done a fabulous job of leading the work on this. Many of you have helped us put the data together, and thank you very much for that. And also thank you in advance for those of you who will be asked to contribute more as we try to finish the work for this. There's an extra piece this year that hasn't happened before, which is a student survey. And we're just starting to put the materials together to get the student survey out. So much of this is somewhere in the 80 to 90% finished range. There are pieces that we'll be reaching out to folks to try to help us complete. And thank you in advance for quickly getting back to us with the data that we need. But I think we're in good shape so far. Thanks again to Terry Porter and all of you for your help in putting this together. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Provost Nairn. The next question is for Chancellor Marks, and you mentioned strategic planning for CU Denver, but there's also CU system strategic planning going on. So how will our 8 focus areas correspond to the system level strategic planning?
Sure, the CU system is resuming their system-wide strategic planning efforts, and it's already well underway, and it focuses on 4 pillars: affordability, student success, discovery and impact, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the ways that all 4 of the campuses will contribute to that. And these are all themes that will be discussed in our CU Denver-based process. These our processes are running in parallel, and we're going to make sure that the goals and the action steps and the metrics required in the system strategic plan are intertwined and connect with our 2030 vision and the resulting strategic initiatives in our plan.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor Marks. And keeping with the strategic planning focus, We have Engineering Dean Marty Dunn here, and a question from staff for him. There are already many ongoing strategic planning-like initiatives going on across campus, including enrollment management, online education, the ideal student experience, and the equity task force. Will these be engaged in the strategic plan, and if so, how?
Well, thanks, Paul. You're right. And thanks for the question. You highlight one of our big challenges is really how do we think boldly about the future, to think 10 years out without disrupting many of the important essential activities that are going on, excuse me, that are going on now and are strategic and will certainly be part of our long-term future. You rattled off a good list of initiatives, and there are more, including, for example, how do we interact and engage with Anschutz kind of going forward. Part of the challenge is that many of these are focused on significant actions at different and generally shorter timescales that have already challenging teams and getting them, stretching them already. So we know it's essential that we kind of adequately represent many of the items that you mentioned in our process. And furthermore, the fact that there are so many ongoing activities can really be an advantage if we leverage our efforts. And this is our intent. And so we're really working to create kind of an approach with kind of three pieces to integrate them into our planning process. We're building the working groups and strategic planning to have cross-representation so that the workings of the various ongoing efforts are efficiently brought into the plan. The overall plan is being developed with a four-step design innovation framework with the 8 working groups that Chancellor Marks mentioned. The first step involves creating and executing a stakeholder engagement plan to understand the setting of a university now. And here we'll systematically engage these various groups, understand their goals, constraints, etc., and create a plan to dovetail their efforts into the strategic plan. As well as provide feedback and support to their efforts. And the third piece is that we're charging the steering committee with the explicit task of having their eyes open and identifying proactively activities that could and should be integrated into our efforts and facilitating the connections between them and the relevant working groups. And we're just launching the steering committee tomorrow, but we've already worked out a number of these integrated activities, including with the equity task force and our connection with CU Anschutz.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Marty. And there's a related question from a staff member about strategic planning. It says, I'd be curious to learn more about the makeup of the steering committee and the working groups and how they were identified and selected, and how the advancement team will be integrated into the planning process.
Oh, okay. Well, that's 2 questions. So since you asked 2 questions, I'm going to steal a little bit of airtime to follow up on kind of Michelle's comment, and please encourage you to engage with our effort that just kicked off this week and engage in the ideation sessions and surveys kind of this week and next week. So to the question, the steering committee was recruited kind of through a process where we solicited nominations from deans and cabinet members, as well as engagements that many members of the CU Denver community through the 100 Days of Listening tour. Kind of the committee was formed to strike a balance among many factors, some of these including, leadership skills, visionary thinking capabilities, the ability to integrate with and complement leaders of some of the multiple ongoing strategic initiatives that we just discussed, and with an explicit goal of representing the diversity kind of of our campus along multiple dimensions and multiple constituent groups. The working groups are being formed as we speak, and we'll be done with that, we think, in the next week or so. And they'll be even broader in reach and seek to represent all units, schools, colleges, and initiatives across campus as well. You also asked about advancement, and during the work of the strategic planning kind of working groups and steering committee, we're going to ask each of these teams to engage big cross-cutting questions, kind of questions like, how do we in your area contribute to securing our financial future? And to do so, kind of to engage those questions, they'll have membership from kind of multiple groups, including finance, and of experts, including advancement. And we finally expect the outcomes of the work will provide the key ingredients to subsequently and rapidly design and launch a major fundraising campaign for the university.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Marty. And a different kind of question for Chancellor Marks, and she did address this a little bit in her comments, but there have been several questions about remote working. This question from a staff member is, if we've been working remotely since March and it's worked well, is it safe to assume that we can continue working remotely until at least the vaccine is widespread? And are there discussions about the future of remote work and things we've learned from this experience?
Yes, it's safe to assume that if you've been working remotely, that you'll be working remotely until the vaccine is widespread. And yes, I've heard directly from so many of you that teleworking for many of you is working well, at least in some capacity, and you'd like opportunities to weigh in on how we go forward into the future. And so I have asked HR to lead conversations across the institution, and we will be coming back to you later this semester with thinking around and proposals for the future of telework at CU Denver.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor Marks. There's a faculty question about implementing the annual review and annual performance review process in the pandemic environment. If the question asks, and this should go to Provost Nairn, I think, to provide some specific examples about how we're dealing with that process this year.
Okay, so I think faculty are aware that annual faculty evaluation is under the auspices or control, if you like, of the primary unit faculty. Campus guidance, however, was asked for from faculty assembly, and I worked with them to come up with some guiding principles that have been distributed to the schools and colleges, and we've asked that they be made available to faculty and the primary units as they start this evaluation cycle. I think the sort of bottom line message, if you like, is let's recognize all of the changes that people have had to make suddenly and be generous and provide some latitude around this evaluation cycle. As far as some specific examples might come up, I mean, really these are under the auspices of the primary units, but I could imagine, for example, a situation where, let's say, a tenured associate professor, faculty member on a 40-40-20 fairly standard workload distribution had made some agreements last year about what they would achieve in their scholarly activity, but found themselves, because of the pandemic, spending an extra amount of time recreating all of their teaching activities to be remote and online, and perhaps did not have as much time to make as much progress in the scholarly area as they might have indicated they intended to. I would hope that that would be taken into account, and there'd be some flexibility in the primary unit for how that's evaluated, specifically thinking about the unanticipated change in effort that was required, and that faculty that were involved in that evaluation would provide some latitude and recognize the extra work that was done in the teaching mission, if you like, that resulted in perhaps less activity in the scholarly mission. But again, I would emphasize those are decisions that are part of the work of the primary unit and are under the auspices of the faculty. But I think provides an example of something that I think probably is going to be fairly widespread this year, just based on what faculty have had to do. I hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Provost Nairn. Next question for Jennifer Sobonet is about RTD. And I think we saw a recent email on this, but if you could expand upon that, what plans are being made to consider reinstating the RTD Eco Pass? Some staff members feel like it's very important for public transit to get to work, and that loss of that benefit was, kind of a loss of income for staff, and what's going on with the future for RTD.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, this has been a difficult journey, obviously, with not being able to continue with the EcoPass during the difficulties of COVID. But I have good news on this front, and it comes out of a great deal of very involved negotiations with RTD and also our partners at Auraria, including Community College of Denver, AHEC, and MSU Denver. And we've been working really closely with the new general manager and CEO of RTD, Deborah Johnson, and with her leadership, we have been able to create a pilot program for the EcoPass that will start tomorrow and go through June 30th. And it will allow each individual employee at CU Denver and at the Auraria institutions to opt in to the EcoPass option, and it's $115 for the entire time of the spring semester through to June 30th. And so there's a couple of really specific action steps that you need to take if you want to get this EcoPass. You have to get a new photograph for yourself. You have to get a new EcoPass, and there are specific instructions in the communication that we sent out on Tuesday. And so follow up and look at those instructions. It also allows, if you want to opt into the EcoPass later on in the semester, the price goes down over time. So it's really good news. I want to thank RTD publicly because they've been fabulous in creating this pilot for us. I also want to just mention that they've been great in helping us with the College Pass for our students for this spring also. And for those of you who don't want to take public transit but need to come into work, reach out to the facilities department. We do have some free parking that we've opened up since December 1st in the buildings, our own buildings on the city side of Spear. So you have a couple of different options, and it's just nice to have good news on that front. Thanks, Paul.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Next couple of questions are about vaccines, and Chris Puckett, our outstanding COVID manager for the campus, I think can address these. Will there be a fee for students to get the vaccine on campus if that's the way they end up getting it? And will it be required for all students to have the coronavirus vaccine?
The answer is no, there will be no fee, nor will we be asking for individual status. In fact, we confirmed today that to get the process started, all we needed was somebody's employee ID or student ID, their email, and their name, basically. Now, we're still working on all those details, but it takes very little for us to get someone into the process. Now, as far as are we going to require students to have the vaccine, what I would say is no, not at this time. I don't know of any institution or K-12, frankly, that's going to require it, nor do I know how they could at this point. I think in the future, is that a conversation that could change? Perhaps, but frankly, I would just tell you, I don't think that's likely anytime soon or recent.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Another vaccine-related question for you. The faculty member who asked the question sees that essential frontline workers are included in phase 1B of the state's vaccine plan. Does this include any CU Denver faculty or staff? And how will the university determine which ones are considered frontline essential and therefore eligible for early vaccination?
That is a great question. And I just have to tell you, if my kids come screaming in here, I did my best, and you feel free to judge my parenting, okay? Because I can hear them rumbling. What I would say is this is a great question. And frankly, a number of us, including President Kennedy, had some time today. We're on a call with the governor's chief of staff and a head of CDPHE to discuss this very topic. What I would tell you is at this point, it's unclear what's going to happen as far as what we call below the line frontline essential workers in education. What I can tell you, and this is absolutely the priority, is that we need to continue to encourage everyone in our community who's 65 plus or 70 plus, get vaccinated, get it quick, get it done, because the statistics for people who are in those higher age brackets to have serious injury, hospitalization, and death is significant. And so the state is basically just asking everyone to focus on the 500,000 or so folks who are going to be in that category. I think it's probably going to grow a little bit since we heard 65 plus this week. We haven't heard the exact numbers. So we're absolutely going to try and focus on that as much as possible. So what I would ask you to do is put a pin on this definition of what's going to happen in the future. please know that, as Chancellor Marks indicated in her opening remarks, it's something we're lobbying on. We're very aware of it. People are talking about it on a daily basis, and we're going to continue to try and do our best to figure out a good answer and to get our campus vaccinated as quickly and as equitably as possible.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. The next question is the last question of the prepared ones in advance for Provost Nairn. I can see that we have about 12 or more questions that you all have put in, and we'll be getting to as many of those as we can next. Rod, the question is from a student: will spring semester students have a modified grading option? And also related to that, will students who have an in-person class but are for whatever reason not able to attend in person, will they be penalized in grading?
Okay, so 2 questions. The spring semester students will not have a modified grading option again. We did offer that in the spring 2020 and summer 2020 terms, but after a lot of discussion, we decided not to offer it again, mostly because it has long-term, largely negative implications for students with respect to their financial aid and how they progress through academic programs to graduate and professional schools. So we decided not to offer the modified grading option again. However, we recognize the challenges that students are under, and we wanted to provide some additional flexibility and help. So what we did do is update our standard grading option, if you like, to afford undergraduate students the option to have approved the additional pass-fail flexibility, so they can extend the time at which they elect to do that out to the 10th week. So we have provided that. We're doing this kind of flexibility on a term-by-term basis right now because it does have an impact with respect to the CU-wide uniform grading policy, so we can't implement it completely yet without support from all across the system. But in addition to the extending the time where students can choose for appropriate courses, not graduate courses, but appropriate undergraduate courses out to the 10th week, we've added the P+ grade for certain courses, which gives students an additional advantage of being able to record the equivalent of a C-. So we think we've added some additional help for students when we couldn't have the modified grading option again. So we hope that helps. If you have any questions, I know those are complicated areas. I would encourage you to meet with your advisor and work your way through this, especially if you're thinking about adopting pass-fail for a class that might have implications with respect to entrance to a graduate or professional program in the future. So the second question, I think, was about if students are taking a class that's listed to be in person and don't actually attend the class in person, will they be penalized? And I think that really gets down to what are the circumstances that led to that. Obviously, if the university and the faculty member felt that there was a need for in-person because it was a lab class or a team participation class or whatever, the student really needs to get with that faculty person and explain why it is that they can't attend in person. I would hope if that's related to illness or COVID-19 or something like that, that would be viewed as extenuating circumstances and something could get worked out where they're not penalized. But obviously the intent was that there was something about that class that required in-person participation. So it's very important, I think, that the student or students get with the faculty member and possibly with their dean's office and see what they can resolve. But we've asked everybody to be as generous and give as much latitude as possible as we try to deal with unanticipated circumstances or in the pandemic. And we would hope that that would take place. Thanks, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Provost. I'll note that there's more of a comment than a question about the university's excellent handling of the COVID situation so far, and particularly praise for Chris Puckett in that regard. So even if your children run across the screen, it doesn't outweigh the praise that you're getting on the comments. We're now moving to the questions that you're asking live, and I'm going to combine a couple of them, two for Jennifer that are, I think, challenging ones. One is related to whether we'll be relaxing the hiring chill. We haven't called a hiring freeze, but a hiring chill in the coming fiscal year. And also, with the federal aid and the good news that we're not going to face furloughs going forward, it seems, is there a chance of a raise pool for next fiscal year?
Those are great questions. Thanks, Paul. So yes, it was really great news that Chancellor Marks could announce that we do not plan on furloughs starting July 1st. And what I would say is around a salary pool and the hiring chill is we still have several unknowns that we need to work through. Chancellor Marks mentioned these in her comments, but obviously getting the details around the federal COVID relief funds and how those will be distributed. We are waiting for that information. It's just being released and being analyzed by the CU System Office. Obviously, state support and how the state budget will work its way through during legislative session. And along the lines of state support, we're looking at what tuition increases we might be able to bring forward after 3 years of having the same tuition rate. And then finally, enrollment, understanding our enrollment situation. Those are all unknowns that we have at this point. As you all know from the layer cake video from back in the springtime, that there's ways for us to influence all of these things and work through all of these things, but they come together to provide us with a full picture of what our budget will look like. So to answer specifically the question around salary pool and hiring chill, I sure do hope so. I hope we can get rid of the hiring chill. I sure do hope so that we can have some type of even a small merit pool. But I can't commit to anything today. Instead, we just have to let this process work its way through and know that we are on it. We are watching it. We're analyzing it constantly, working with the chancellor and with the provost, as well as the deans and our shared governance leaders on how we can move forward with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. There's a very important question out about the fall class planning. And if the vaccines roll out successfully this spring and summer, what might we expect for the fall semester in terms of classes being in person? And maybe we'll start with Elena on that. And if the provost or the chancellor want to weigh in, it's a difficult question at this point.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate that. And Chris, you probably want to weigh in as well. So at this point, what's important to know is that our planning for the fall semester is that we will still be maintaining the really important safety protocols that Chancellor Marks mentioned at the beginning. So that includes social distancing and masking. So with the social distancing, that means that our occupancies do have to remain at the levels that they are now. But what we are actively looking at is how can we expand our opportunities for on-campus experience for those students that want to have those. Another key aspect of this is obviously the uptake of the vaccine and how many within the community are participating in the vaccine. So Chris, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that piece.
I would just say that you're spot on. I think we all have to remember that there are a couple pieces that still need to fall into place on the vaccine. The first of which is there currently is not clear scientific evidence if getting vaccinated keeps you from spreading it to somebody else. That's a big question. We also are going to have undoubtedly people in our community who aren't comfortable or can't take the vaccine. And so what that means is we're going to have a population that we need to continue to protect, and we need to protect each other. And the way we do that is with mask wearing, social distancing, and with lower room capacities. Now, I think what Elena said it, and you'll see it in the weekly COVID email that goes out, and I put it together earlier today. Our hope is that we will have more in-person experiences in the fall for our students. They probably will look different. Then it's not going to be a return to fall 19 or fall 18 or fall 1992 when I first went to school, Dr. Nairn. But we do hope that as people are comfortable and get vaccinated, that we will be able to offer those experiences. So we will continue to keep you in the loop on things as they change, but that's where we are today. Thanks for the question.
Great. Any other thoughts on that from the provost or chancellor, or shall we move on?
I would just say I think we're in a much more hopeful place. I think we ought to look forward to return to something normal-ish. Whether it will be in the fall, I think remains to be determined. One of the one of the ways I think we ought to maybe think about this is there's a significant light at the end of the tunnel, but right now we're still in the tunnel. And there's a lot of things that we don't know about how we're going to get to the end of that tunnel and out into the light. So there's a lot more work to be done, but I think it's a lot more hopeful than it was even a month ago.
Terrific. Thank you. Next question. There's a question about ODE, the Office of Digital Education. And there's a lot of, according to the question, rumors swirling around what's going on with ODE. And I think Chancellor Marks might best address that.
Well, there has been a lot of transition, and it's true. Things haven't gone as smoothly. You know, that when I arrived this past summer, ODE was recently had been moved from CU Denver Anschutz to the system, and I think for the last 6 months there's been a fair amount of churn in figuring out what our new model is going to be. It is also true that Scott Chadwick and Sheena Bull are no longer in the leadership roles at ODE at the system level. Scott resigned, and Sheena is back at the School of Public Health, I believe, in her faculty role. So there'll be a search for new leadership there. And I think it's also fair to say at CU Denver, since losing our entire online team, we need to figure out what we're going to do from a leadership perspective on campus. What I can say is that lots of work is being done right now to figure out the relationship, and I feel much more positive today about the nature of the relationship between the 4 campuses and the system ODE. The ODE is becoming a service center that will offer non-academic services at the system level for campuses and programs that desire it. And we have faculty and staff working on negotiating that relationship right now, and I'm in the loop on it, and I feel good about that. So it's true that both at the system and campus level, we need to figure out our leadership situations, but I think it's also true that we're headed towards a model that I think can be very good for CU Denver. And more, I think I'm going to be sending a communication out. Things do seem to be changing weekly, but I think I'm anticipating a communication out to our campus community within a week or so to give you the latest updates in writing.
Thank you. We're down to about our last 5 minutes. We've got several more questions. I'm going to combine a few of them. One is about the fact, Chancellor Marks, that we have a bunch of new high-level leadership positions open that will be filled, and how do we maintain our position in Denver and Colorado with new people coming in and expand that. And one is specifically related to the CIO position, the Chief Information Officer, and perhaps Jennifer Sauvanet wants to talk a little bit about that.
Jennifer, do you want to take the CIO, the next step on that, or do you want to do that first?
So I can do that first and then let you take the
Yep.
question of across the board changes. Sure. So as you all know, towards the end of the summer, early fall, Russ Poole, who has been our CIO for years, and it's been over a decade here, left the university for a fabulous opportunity in Texas. And we were lucky enough to bring together a really great team of Laura Morris, David Lowry, Chris Smith, and Katie Blott, who have really created some great synergies together with our Denver Anschutz work together, as well as our work with the system office on the IT side. And it's just been a really fabulous experience with all of them in those interim roles. And I just want to give a shout out to them and thank them for this work. We don't have a specific answer around the next steps for the CIO quite yet, but I want you to know that we're actively working on that. Chancellor Marks and Chancellor Elliman and Executive Vice Chancellor Carruthers and I met just before the holiday break and worked through some details there, and we're working together to figure out the next steps on that. So stay tuned. We should have some information soon, and we'll be able to provide that.
I think the question was that the first part, Paul, of the question was around our impact, CU Denver's important impact as an asset to the city and to the surrounding region. And I love that question. And it's something that I heard a lot about during my listening tour. And I am so committed to continuing to build on our critical partnership with the city and the region and the state that part of the way that we've organized our strategic planning process is around partnerships with entities. And as we also had some leadership team down at South Denver whose role was to do some of this, and we've lost that team recently in the various transitions with South Denver and otherwise. So you'll see that I'll be looking to find ways in our academic units and centrally to find ways to build back our leaders to help us commit to strengthening our relationship with the city and with the state. It's a priority for CU Denver. I heard a lot about the fact that we're still a best kept secret. So part of this is building partnerships, but part of it is strengthening our identity and our brand and ensuring that everybody knows how awesome we are.
Great, thank you. Couple more quick questions, I think. One for Rod that I think is a combination of a couple of questions. We've already talked a little bit about annual faculty evaluation, but there's some questions about tenure clock stoppages and whether there might be more to do in that area or whether we're good with what we did this year.
There are continuing conversations about whether the extensions that we provided for folks should be looked at again and maybe further extended, but there's no definite commitment to that yet. That's something that the provosts across all of the campuses have been talking about. Some of that depends, I think, on how effectively we come back with vaccines and come back into normal-ish operations. But it is something we're looking at. I mean, I think we're very sensitive to the fact that this is unlikely to be a one-year impact on faculty, especially faculty that just trying to get started with their scholarly careers. So we will be continuing to look at it, and I think there'll be more conversation early this coming semester, and we'll get back to you with some additional information on that one. Nothing definite yet, but definitely something that we're aware of that we need to look at.
Great, thank you, Rod. One last question about CU South and CU South Denver and what's going on with that. If Jennifer could talk about that, and then I'll be glad to kick it back to Chancellor Marks for some final remarks. Thank you.
Sure. CU South is on the market, and it was a very difficult decision that we had to make. And we will continue to have presence in South Denver and let this unfold as we are just putting it onto the market.
Great. And I think the other questions that we're not getting to right now, there are people behind the scenes hopefully giving you an answer. If you don't get a good one, please feel free to email me or any of the other panelists after this to get a good answer to your questions. But these are great questions. Lots of things I've learned. And Chancellor Marks, do you want to tie this together?
I'll be quick. I just want to thank everybody who's tuned in today to hear what's going on and to ask your questions. I know that it's an incredibly challenging time, but I feel so optimistic about our future together. So thank you so much. And a special thank you to the leadership team on the Zoom today. Thanks to everybody. And I look forward to connecting with you later in the semester.